Welcome back, everybody. In today's video, we're going to be breaking down a couple mock drafts that Bobby's found. So, it's just about time for the NFL draft, one of the most exciting times, at least of the offseason. So, we're going to get a good view into where some of these analysts think that some of our favorite players are going to go. And we'll break down, what we think about the draft selections in terms of, the fit, the range in which we think they should be going versus where they're going in these mock drafts. And then potentially players that we think we should probably avoid if this were to happen.
Yeah, and this specific one is from Pro Football Network. This is a full 3-round mock draft that we generally, thought there wasn't too many mistakes. There's some mock drafts out there that are just super wild that they're not even worth going over because they're just that unrealistic. But let's go ahead and jump into this. So first round, at the top of the first round at the 101, the Titans, you get a few names in there. You got Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, and then Cam Ward are like the three realistic options for them. In this scenario, they do go Abdul Carter. So I think there's a good chance they take Cam Ward, but, he's... Abdul Carter's fine. We have some knocks on him, but he's definitely quick and has an explosive first step. So I wouldn't be mad if they took him at 1, but I think Cam Ward's probably the play at 1.
Yeah. So what I'm going to say is I'm pretty sure, regardless as to who makes the pick, that Cam Ward is going to be going first overall. If the Titans are not sold on him, and if you're sold on a quarterback and you don't have one, you're probably going to take one. But, the GM was saying they're not going to pass on generational talent. I don't think Cam Ward is, a generational talent. But what I think is most likely to happen if they don't just take Cam Ward themselves is that they trade down to either 2 or 3, and then they still get the player that they wanted anyways. But I have a strong inclination that either the Browns or the Titans, or the Giants rather, are going to do anything they can to get the quarterback of their choice. So I really don't think that he will be going first, but he may be going to the Titans.
And it's kind of an interesting dynamic with the Giants and the Browns, right? So let's say the Titans aren't interested in the QB prospects. There's going to be kind of like this weird bidding war between New York and Cleveland where the Titans are just going to give the pick up to the highest bidder. So I think that's what's going to end up happening if Tennessee doesn't decide to go Cam Ward, which there is a decent possibility. The Titans do need quarterback themselves. Moving on to number 2, this is where Cam Ward ends up going to the Browns. How do you feel about this landing spot? Browns historically not very good at picking quarterbacks. So
in terms of the offensive line, it's a little bit rough around the edges, but there's definitely some talent there. They could look to beef it up with a little bit with some more draft selections along the O-line potentially later in the draft here. If for some reason Cam Ward isn't going first overall, regardless as to who he's going to, this is definitely what's going to happen, in my opinion. I think the Browns and everybody at this point clearly has Cam Ward as a QB1. In terms of the fit, in terms of positional skill position players, you have David Njoku, who's still kicking it. He's still pretty good. Jerry Jeudy showed out with Jameis Winston. We'll see, without him. Cedric Tillman's a fine X receiver too. And they potentially could look to get some running back help as well.
Yeah, and I would be shocked if they don't go running back in the second round or the third round at the very least. And I wouldn't be surprised if they bring in another talented receiver, right? There's a few of them in this draft, so I wouldn't be surprised if they combine maybe Cam Ward with maybe a Xavier Restrepo, maybe, something like that. Get the Miami teammates back together. Who knows? But yeah, historically, Browns quarterbacks I'm not very fond of, but Cam Ward, he's our QB1 of the class, so definitely has some upside there for sure. Moving on to number 3, the Giants, pretty standard here. They picked Shedeur Sanders out of Colorado. Outside of Malik Neighbors and Theo Johnson, they don't have a lot to work with. I know Wan'Dale's still there, but I don't know how much of a star Wan'Dale is. He's kind of like a PPR scam artist maybe. But, yeah, how do you feel about the Giants thing? I'm not necessarily a big fan of it.
Yeah, so I think we can both agree that Shedeur Sanders has a problem with his drop depth in terms of the dropbacks. In terms of specifically making his tackle's life, difficult. Well, their left tackle generally does deal with some injuries, but Thomas is also a good player when healthy. The right tackle is a giant question mark. I don't like this fit in the sense of I think the offensive line is not suited to protect him. Sure, you have Neighbors, that's great. Wandale Robinson's fine. Theo Johnson's probably going to be a little bit slow, coming off the ACL tear. Theoretically, from a weapon standpoint, it's fine, right? But the offensive line, unless he quickly adapts his uh, pocket ability to be able to really help out the leverage of his tackles, I think this is a disaster waiting to happen.
I completely agree. I think he is a strong candidate if he goes to the Giants at 3 to be the most sacked quarterback next year with a mixture of the O-line play and his bad pocket awareness. So I would definitely avoid Shedeur Sanders at the 3 spot here for the Giants. Now moving on to the 4 spot. Travis Hunter finally goes off the board. I know for both of us, he's one of our top players in the draft, right? He's probably the most talented player in this draft. I don't know many people that would argue that. I've seen some crazy reports where he's not a top 10 talent in this class. That's bogus. He's at worst top 3 for us. He's got the best ball skills I've ever seen in a prospect ever. So in terms of the Patriots, I think they have just too many holes on the roster to not play him both ways. That sounds crazy. They definitely need corner help, and they got Pop Douglas, and that's about it. They got Boutte, right? There's massive holes at wide receiver and corner. I would be shocked if they don't play this guy both ways. Not maybe full-time both ways, but they will definitely play him both ways if he goes to the Patriots, and that's probably best-case scenario for Travis Hunter.
Yeah, and they did sign Matt Collins, but that's not really a difference maker, in my opinion. Drake May is in desperate need of, a lot, honestly. He needs running back help, in my opinion, but, among the disastrous holes they have on offense, that's probably one of the least concerning ones, to be honest with you, but still not very great. The offensive line per PFF was 34th in the NFL. You heard me right. There were three backup offensive lines who performed better than New England's starting unit this last season. So poor
That's
Drake
mind blowing.
This guy he's a legend for surviving. He did have some concussions, but getting back to being serious, this is a great pick because, like you said, it fills both needs, which they desperately need help at corner, but especially wide receiver. And in this scenario, I do think that Travis Hunter could be a very good asset for us in fantasy because I could not imagine that he doesn't play a good amount of receiver with the complete lack of talent they have outside of him in the receiving core.
Yeah, and if he were just a wide receiver, he would be our wide receiver 1 this year, and it wouldn't necessarily be close. He's actually, I want to say, the only elite prospect that we graded out of the entire 2025 class. So,
yes.
Even if he doesn't play full-time wide receiver, it's going to take a very short amount of time with him playing for the Patriots to realize, we should probably be playing this guy full-time both sides. As long as he can hold up, I don't see any problem with him playing full-time. Let's see. At 5, the Jaguars, they don't really have a need at wide receiver per se. They have a very talented Brian Thomas Jr. I know they need a number 2 there. But maybe running back is where you'd want to go. So, they did release Evan Ingram, and we would hope that Britton Strange is the answer at tight end, and I don't think that they would have tight end in the works for this draft at all until maybe the later rounds. But they decided to go Mason Graham, who is a very talented run-stuffing defensive lineman out of Michigan, super high motor, just absolutely fantastic player all around. So, they basically get the best player available at this point, and I think the Jaguars are in a position at the 5 spot to do that. Just take BPA.
Yeah, they have Trayvon Walker, who's steadily improved and is starting to become, he's arguably, or hasn't been better than Aiden Hutchinson, but he's definitely progressing into a very solid edge rusher for them. And then obviously they have Josh Hines-Allen on the other end. This solidifies the middle. I would want nothing to do with being an offensive lineman facing off against this revamped defensive line. They could also go tackle. Poor Trevor Lawrence, this guy. Nobody ever really says this, but his offensive line play, both in creating holes in the run game, but also protecting him, has been terrible his entire career. God bless Trevor Lawrence. I don't know how he's still alive, to be honest with you.
Yeah, he almost didn't make it this past season for sure with that Aziz Al-Shire hit. But at 5, I know, the tackles in terms of just overall talent hasn't been as high as in other classes. So maybe at the 5 spot, it's just a little too early. They could be a candidate to trade back maybe to the 10 or something like that if the Bears wanted to trade up or something. But overall, I like this pick for Jacksonville. Now to the 6th spot, the Raiders. They just got Geno Smith. I don't think quarterback is in play with this first 6 picks, on the 6th pick for them. So they get, in a lot of people's opinions, the best overall well-rounded tackle, guard, probably, in the class. Will Campbell. I don't hate this at all. They definitely have a hole on the offensive line. They definitely need offensive line help for sure. But I think this is a fine selection for the Raiders.
Yeah, I haven't really looked too hard into Campbell because we make fantasy content. But obviously, I did know the arm length is a concern. Definitely would, based on traditional standards, move him inside. They definitely have a need. So as far as Geno Smith's pass blocking for him is concerned, and also creating holes in the run game, definitely a solid pick. And they need help everywhere on offense besides tight end.
And, we haven't called Ted McMillan's name just yet, but I did mock him 6 to the Raiders because in terms of skill positions, they might be the worst in the entire NFL in terms of skill positions. Yes, they have Brock Bowers, but that's literally it. Jacoby Myers is fine, but he was an undrafted free agent for a reason. Yeah, the Titans are bad as well, right? But with Will Campbell, I've heard that his tape's absolutely amazing. I haven't gotten to watch a lot of his tape, but I will say from some of the people that I trust, his tape is a little overrated, but he is still overall probably the most complete lineman in this class. Moving on to 7, a similar pick here for the Jets. You have Kelvin Banks Jr. out of Texas, probably the highest upside player in terms of size. Probably has the most potential to play tackle out of, the top 3-4 guys. Definitely big guy. I think he's 6'6", 330, 320, something like that. So that's great. We've seen what Justin Fields does in the past with no O-line. So, we'd rather him use his legs in New York for actual running plays and not running for his life like he did in Chicago. So, yeah, I like this pick for the Jets a lot as well.
Yeah, and it pairs up quite well with Olu Fashanu, who they took last year. Get him, a teammate on the other edge. Help Justin Fields out a little bit. Honestly, as far as the Jets are concerned, they're fine with Garrett Wilson as their wide receiver 1. They have Breece Hall and Allen behind him, so they're fine at running back. This would help both Justin Fields, their running game, and even Garrett Wilson to an extent as well.
Yeah, for sure. Moving on to 8, this is where Ted McMillan's name gets called. I've seen this multiple times on multiple mock drafts where the Panthers just take Ted McMillan, even though they just, kind of took a vertical X receiver in the draft last year in Xavier Legette. I don't know how to feel about this one. I want to say like this could be a mistake or something, but I've seen it on multiple drafts now. I've seen him go as early as 6. I've seen him go as early as 4 to the Patriots. I don't think they ever pick him over Travis Hunter. Then I've seen him go as late as 19. I will say at his pro day today, he ran a very impressive 40-yard dash. Some people are saying 4.48. That's like the most common number. And then some people are saying 4.57. So it's a little wishy-washy there. But, we do think he's the best receiver in the class, just pure receiver. So top 10 draft capital is great. But Panthers is kind of a rough landing spot just because of the QB situation, right? So how are you feeling about the Panthers taking Ted McMillan?
Yeah, so this creates a little bit of a conundrum, right? Because you have Legette at vertical X, you have Adam Thielen as your Z, and then you have Coker as your big slot. That means that one of them, you'd forget about it, right? Then you even potentially have JT Sanders. Now, none of these guys are going to be taking away targets from Ted particularly. But it is a little bit interesting as to where they would play him. I'd imagine they might make him a slot over Jalen Coker. I think that would be a fantastic alignment for him. But definitely can play outside. The stacking ability down the field is a little bit questionable. I personally think that Leggett would still be best used as their vertical X, and I think if they ran a good bit of 11 personnel, that McMillan could be quite good in the slot for them.
Yeah, Leggett's just a freak athlete, can stack, down the field vertically. So you'd want him in that vertical X role. Your Z with Thielen, he's been performing exceptionally good compared to what people thought he was going to do in Carolina. Obviously, he got hurt last year, but when he did play, he was impressive. Now, Coker's a guy, this is why it doesn't really make sense to me for the Panthers to take a wide receiver here. Coker played really good down the stretch, has a lot of potential. Yeah, he was an undrafted guy at a Holy Cross, but he's played fairly well this year this past season. And Ted McMillan falling to 8, I would just pass up on him if I'm the Panthers, because then you have to take one of these promising guys and basically put him on the bench, right? And that's probably going to be Coker, which is fine. But, I'd like to see Ted McMillan a little more versatile, right? And the Panthers receiver room just doesn't have room for versatility, right? Because they're kind of stretched thin. So Ted McMillan would probably play 65 to 70% of the slot if he landed in Carolina, I would assume. All right. Moving on to 9. Probably the most shocking first-round selection. We did give a brief look over this list before, and this was the one that was the most shocking to us just because of how low we are on Jackson Dart. He goes top 10, number 9 to the Saints, which isn't a bad landing spot at all for Jackson Dart. He's not going to play his rookie year, but that's kind of what we'd like for some of these lower end prospects that we don't think are as pro ready. So how do you feel about Jackson Dart to New Orleans?
Yeah, so it's definitely a good thing that he's probably not going to be starting right away. That would be disastrous in my opinion. I would prefer, honestly, for all of these quarterbacks that they don't have to start right away, even though with some of them, it's going to happen anyways. Yeah, as far as the fit, the offensive line is fine, but aging out a little bit. As far as the weapons or the playmakers, Chris Olave, hopefully, if he can stop being thrown into the hospital by Derek Carr.
Yep. Rashid
Shaheed.
Jawan Johnson he just had a massive contract extension. Rashid's
still got
Kamara for at least a couple more years.
You could do worse, although like we said, it'd be pretty shocking if he goes top 10, and I don't think he's that talented to go top 10 personally.
Yeah, and obviously a team could make a New York Giants Daniel Jones type of selection where nobody thinks this guy's a first-round talent, probably a second, maybe even third, and then they just say, who cares, I'm taking my guy anyways. That could happen with Dart. I know there's a ton of hype on him, but yeah, this wouldn't be great for Dart, I think. Maybe, you sit him for a year, they get a little bit more weapons behind him, maybe add a running back and another receiver. Then he'd have no excuses. Definitely needs some offensive line help as well. But yeah, I just think the talent doesn't match up with the pick for me. All right, moving on to 10, Chicago. Although they have probably had one of the better free agencies in the NFL over this past couple weeks, they still need tackle help, right? They got their interior solidified, at least for the next 2 or 3 years, with Joe Thuney and who's the other guy they got? Another talented guy. I think it was Jonah Williams, right? Yeah, Jonah Williams. And then Dahlman from Atlanta. Yeah, that's right. From Atlanta as their center, who was a pretty above average starting center. So they definitely got their interior. We obviously know they don't need receiver help. They had one of the best receiving cores last season, even though they didn't produce particularly well. Swift is fine in the backfield, especially with a good offensive line. You saw that in Detroit. You saw that with the Eagles as well. He can produce. They go with best tackle available in Armand Membu out of Missouri. Solid, very good, ferocious pass blocker, right? Who's solid in the run game, but, nothing crazy. So, Yeah, I think he's a pretty refined prospect. The Bears get a tackle, and then they just stick with their top 10-ish defense that they've had over the past few seasons, and then say, Caleb Williams, go take it. And then I think if they can do this and all of their free agent picks work out, they're very easily a playoff team for me, if not a first seed, like a top 3 seed for me in the NFC. So how are you feeling about Armand Membu?
Yeah, so as far as general consensus from Bears fans, I've followed a lot of Bears media because I drafted Caleb Williams in one of my dynasty teams, one of my main teams. And common consensus is that Darnell Wright, their right tackle, has been very dependable and has been a quality starter and improving. But it's been a bit of a mixed bag for Braxton Jones, their left tackle. So I definitely think that this is a good play because Braxton Jones is going to be, I believe, on the final year of his contract this next season. So they could just, not have to pay a left tackle an exorbitant amount of money, which is would further allow them to fill out the rest of the roster. They've made tremendous moves on the defensive line as well as the interior of the offensive line. This has the potential to be one of the biggest turnarounds that we've seen from an offense.
It kind of reminds me of the second year of Dan Campbell, right? I think the first year with Dan Campbell, they only won 4 games. You get Ben Johnson in there, a guy that's familiar with turning around a franchise, like the Lions. They go in, and I bet they win at least 10 games next year, in my opinion. So now we're out of the top 10, so we're going to go through these a little more quickly. We'll stop on the skill position players, right? Just kind of go back and forth between each pick. So 11, Will Johnson to the 49ers. Great pick. Probably the best cornerback in the draft if you're not Travis Hunter. So that's great for you. Great for the 49ers. Takes best player available. That's good. Then this one we definitely have to talk about. Ashton Jeanty going to the Cowboys at 12 kind of sounds like, it's just been said over and over and over, right? That Jeanty goes to the Cowboys. That's not really consensus anymore. I've seen him go all over the place. I've seen him go to the Steelers. I've seen him go to the Broncos. I've seen him go as early as 6 to the Raiders. So, this one I'd like the most. Obviously, fantasy owners would love Ashton Jeanty for the Cowboys. How are you feeling about this landing spot specifically?
Yeah, so I definitely think that it's a fine landing spot. Keep in mind, though, that this offensive line is not quite what it once was in terms of the run blocking ability. So it isn't quite as good. Zach Martin, for instance, just retired. So now there's absolutely worse scenarios because, Dallas has their quarterback. They have CeeDee Lamb. They do have the passing game to take some of the attention away from the defenses, towards Jeanty. So this is a solid landing spot. And historically, the Cowboys have been, or have attempted at least, to give a primary ball carrier the majority of the rushes and the receiving game work. So as far as, obviously besides being a top half of the first round pick and, with that draft capital, almost certainly getting the lion's share of the work, this is historically a franchise that would do so.
Yeah, for sure. And Jeanty is one to hold up if you see how many carries he got last year. A ridiculous amount of carries, so he definitely can hold up there. All right, moving on. The Dolphins take a tackle. That's a fine choice. Yeah. Obviously, they have their receiving core set. They have their running back set. Tua, as long as he doesn't die next season, he's fine. So definitely go tackle here. That makes the most sense. Protect Tua. All right, and then 14, kind of another surprise. We have Colston Loveland as the first tight end off the board to the Indianapolis Colts. We think it's not necessarily a death sentence to go to the Colts right now as a tight end, but it's not great. If Anthony Richardson is the same Anthony Richardson that went out there last year, we're going to be in some trouble for any sort of receivers that go to the Colts. So how do you feel about Colston Loveland to the Colts?
Yeah, so for the short term with Anthony Richardson there, it's actually quite poor from a quarterback standpoint. And then also with target competition, they have Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, A.D. Mitchell, Alec Pierce. And then they like to run the ball extensively with Jonathan Taylor. So from an opportunity standpoint in the short term, I really don't like it. Now, if Daniel Jones takes over, I like it a little bit more. But I think this would be, while ironically this is, them selecting tight end is the most common draft projection, at least in mock drafts. I think this is actually one of the worst situations for a rookie tight end, at least from a target competition standpoint, an opportunity standpoint.
Yeah, and that goes the same with any receiver that would be drafted here, right? I don't necessarily think they go receiver this draft. Their receiving course kind of impressive, in all honesty. They need, Adonai Mitchell to kind of take a leap forward. Josh Downs is an amazing slot receiver now. Alec Pierce is your deep threat, so that's great. They got a great receiving core. Now, I know Colson Loveland is better in the blocking game, right, than Tyler Warren is. So maybe that's why he goes over Tyler Warren, because they need a blocking force for that JT run game, right? So maybe that's why he goes here. Obviously, I think Tyler Warren is too talented to pass up on as the first tight end off the board. So, all right, moving on. 15, Shamar Stewart, a guy that had an unreal combine, absolutely fantastic showing there. The Atlanta Falcons are, since I think 2010, last in sacks by a considerable margin. They just cannot hit with any of their edge rush picks. I think Shamar Stewart is a fairly special player, so that's good. Moving on. Moving on to 16, Javon Walker to the Cardinals. Kind of a very solid off-ball linebacker that can also play edge from time to time, right? So that's good. Cardinals kind of need a little bit of everything, in all honesty. They're kind of a poor football team. Maybe a wide receiver 2, offensive line help from time to time. Linebacker specifically is another point of need. I would also say quarterback, but who's to say? So moving on to
draft.
Yeah, moving on to 17. Another guy that is a freak athlete is Mykel Williams. Another guy that's, can also kind of do it all, kind of off ball, also edge rusher. He kind of reminds me a little bit of a bigger Isaiah Simmons that's a lot better at rushing the passer. Very versatile player, so that is good. Bengals definitely need pass rush if they lose Trey Hendrickson. Could look to get running back in the later rounds, but yeah, I like this one all in all.
They will be going defense. They don't need anything on offense particularly.
Yeah, I agree.
Besides a running back, maybe.
18, Seattle. Sam Darnold definitely needs to not be pressured, or he will make some of the worst throws you'll ever see. So, Tyler Booker out of Alabama. Don't know too much about him, but the fact that the Seahawks are just taking a chance on an offensive lineman, that is good. So Sam Darnold does not have 3-4 interception games. 19, this is an interesting player out of Tennessee, James Pierce Jr. to the Bucks. From everything that I've seen, he's one of the most talented players in the entire draft. Just has a laundry list of off-the-field issues. So he kind of reminds me a little bit of Abdul Carter, slightly bigger. He's got that same type of explosiveness, but obviously been a nightmare to work with from the insiders at Tennessee, what they've said about him. So that's why he falls here. If he didn't have off-the-field issues, I could clearly probably see him being a top 8 player in this draft. So probably even the first edge taken after Abdul Carter too. So you could see wide receiver maybe, since they have 2 aging receivers, maybe a running back 2 later on, but nothing outside.
This guy better not fall to the Eagles. I swear.
It's going to be him or Malachi Starks for sure. The Eagles, they're going to get one of them. Then finally, number 20, we have Tyler Warren to Penn State. I love this landing spot for Tyler Warren, even though they just grabbed Evan Ingram. I know that they will run 2 tight end sets from time to time, and I wouldn't be surprised if they use him in the slot as well. I know they have Devon Vele, who's a very good big slot. Good big slot, not very good, but he's solid at the position. Tyler Warren could be that do-it-all type of player. And if you remember, Sean Payton kind of developed Taysom Hill into that do-it-all type of player. Tyler Warren is basically Taysom Hill 2.0 in my opinion, has the quarterback ability. He did play quarterback in high school, can play running back, wildcat, all of this type of things. So in that Sean Payton offense, I would love to see him do some cool things like Taysom Hill did a few years ago and was still doing up until this year.
Yeah, so we've already seen, in Bo Nix's rookie season, a receiving touchdown from Bo Nix. And so you could imagine that he's going to be used creatively, that being Tyler Warren. Would not be shocked if he has multiple rushing touchdowns if he does get this landing spot. Obviously, moved all around the formation and used to his strengths. This would be. Could you really think of at least a better realistic landing spot than this?
No, I don't think I could.
Competition.
No target competition. I mean, Evan Ingram's there, right? So that's a little.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he'll be the guy there in terms of just their tight end. But Tyler Warren, after they throw Evan Ingram to the side, probably after a year, maybe 2 years if he's lucky, and then Tyler Warren's there to just take over. And I wouldn't be surprised if Tyler Warren comes in there and says, "Evan Ingram, you're sitting on the bench. You're old and cooked. I'm going to stay here, and I'm going to be the tight end in Denver." So I could definitely see that happening.
The only team that might lead the NFL in more 12 personnel than these guys, being the Broncos, is the Cardinals.
Yeah, and I mean, you see how Trey McBride's been working out in Arizona. So moving on to 21, the next running back off the board. A lot of people's RB2s, not necessarily ours, but Omarion Hampton out of North Carolina. Love this landing spot for Omarion Hampton. He reminds me a good bit of Najee Harris, but specifically better in a lot of ways than Najee Harris, right? He's definitely got more agility, and he can make more things happen than Najee Harris out of play structure, right? I've seen Najee Harris just go down after 3 yards over and over and over again. Omarion Hampton definitely has bigger playability than Najee Harris, and they desperately need somebody outside of Jaylen Warren because he has proven not to stay healthy a lot. So, Omarion Hampton here, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, so I think it's an immediate, definite upgrade over Najee Harris. You get everything you got with Najee, except he will stay upright longer. He's faster. Now, as far as the receiving game goes, you could argue that Najee's have been a little bit better coming out, but Hampton possesses the lateral agility to become a more than adequate route runner at the NFL level. He still has the soft hands, and obviously, like we all love, he has the build to be a dynamic 3-down back. Now, Arthur Smith likes to do Arthur Smith things, so who knows? He may get the Bijan Robinson treatment where he's described as a very good decoy. No, I'm kidding. But nonetheless, the only thing is potentially Arthur Smith could not give him the full workload he deserves. But as far as opportunity in general, he should be getting quite a bit of it.
Yeah, I'd be very surprised if he doesn't just fall into that Najee Harris role and get 20 carries a game. I'd be surprised if he doesn't do that because Arthur Smith loves doing that. So moving on to 22, another skill position player, Emeka Egbuka for the Los Angeles Chargers. So they just get 2 Lad McConkeys, basically. I don't know, man. That doesn't make any sense to me. I could see the Chargers going receiver. I don't know if it's Egbuka, but could definitely see them going receiver. They definitely need receiver help. How do you feel about Egbuka to the Chargers?
I don't know, Jim. This makes no sense, to be honest with you. Like you said, you are getting another Lad McConkey. So quite questionable. I guess because it also makes no sense because traditionally they like to run the ball as much as humanly possible, preferably at least under Jim Harbaugh. So I really doubt that this is what happens because, like you said, he's in this scenario. I guess Lad is more suited to be the Z, so I guess he is only a slot, I'd imagine, unless you really want to throw Lad at X, I guess.
Yeah, I think they're, with what's his name? You hate him.
They got
so
Mike
much.
Williams back, he said. Yeah.
Yeah, they got Mike Williams back. Then they had the guy that you hate, big guy. What's his name?
Oh, Quentin Johnston.
Yes. Quentin Johnston. They have Quentin Johnston. They have Mike Williams as, 2 kind of XE types of receivers. I don't know how much longer they're going to be dealing with Quentin Johnston. I know he had a better year this year, but a lot of those came on busted plays. I guess you move McConkey to the Z. He's not necessarily as good there as he is in the slot, but Igmika Gbuka is even more limited in my opinion, and I think he's strictly a slot at the next level. So, yeah, there's that. This is just kind of an interesting thing for me, for sure. All right,
happening.
Moving on. Packers go D-line. Thank goodness they don't go receiver. They don't need any more receivers. They need to figure out their receiving core first before they need to figure out who their one is before they start drafting more players. This guy's pretty solid from what I've been told, so get your best D lineman right and move on. So Packers, solid pick here.
Typical pick too.
Malachi Starks to the Vikings. Yeah, the Vikings definitely need some corner help. They still have Harrison Smith, who is ancient at this point. Definitely need some more DBs for sure. So that's a good pick. Don't need a receiver. Could see them going running back here, maybe if they wanted like a Travion Henderson or something like that. But but Malachi Starks is probably one of the best safeties in the entire draft over the past few years, in my opinion. So,
solid pick, necessary pick for them too. Yep.
Texans get a North Dakota State guard in Gray Zabel. He definitely
line help.
Yes, they definitely need that. You saw how much C.J. Stroud regressed, and they basically traded away all of their O-line. Laramie Tunsil got traded away. They had multiple other guys walk, right? So they're just kind of cooked on the offensive line. They have to rebuild it now. So this is the first step in that, and C.J. Stroud absolutely needs help. So
poor guy.
Moving on next, Nick Scorton out of Texas A&M, the other edge rusher for the Rams. It's kind of crazy they have two edge rushers going in the first round. Solid. I could see receiver here. I doubt they go tight end or running back here, so this is a solid pick for the Rams. Young guys.
I could see them going offensive line potentially if somebody they likes there too, but they could also use edge help to go on the opposite side of Jared Verse.
Yep. Next up, your Baltimore Ravens go Jahdae Barron out of Texas corner. Did y'all released one of y'all's corners, right? I forget his name.
Brandon Stevens left.
Yes. So y'all need a guy to fill his space. Don't need any help on offense, I don't think. Y'all have a decent receiving core. I could see another receiver maybe. Running back stacked. Yeah.
We need a vertical X that scares somebody.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, we got DeAndre Hopkins, but
he's not separating down the field, stacking anymore. All right, moving on to next, we have the Lions. They definitely needed some defensive help. We saw how they ended up doing in the playoffs. Just their defense was just terrible down the stretch. So this makes sense for me. DB, right?
Yes.
Kind of concerns me is when he's healthy. When healthy, that should strike some fear into Lions fan because y'all's defense literally exploded halfway through the season. So, moving on to the next guy. Finally, one of my favorite picks in the first round. Our favorite running back probably, that's not Genty, Travion Henderson. This is probably the best landing spot I can think of. Realistic landing spot, right? I think he goes in the mid to late first round. So, yeah, how do you feel about this? This is fantastic.
Yeah, so, obviously we think Genty is a little bit better as a prospect, but in terms of our favorite running back, he's my favorite. That doesn't, necessarily. So, as far as the landing spot, oh, please. The read option game with Jaden Daniels and this guy, goodness gracious. If people thought the Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry one, which is scary, well, I don't know what you do against this, man.
Yeah, no idea. The most explosive back in the entire class. In my opinion, one of the most well-rounded backs in the entire class. Mix of power, speed, burst, agility, all of that. He has all of that. He just needs to stay healthy. right? Austin Eckler, I know he's still under contract, not necessarily as good as he once was. Brian Robinson Jr. has been relatively inefficient. So I think Travion comes in and is that Jahmyr Gibbs type of player for the Commanders, and then Brian Robinson is more of the David Montgomery, right? So I love this landing spot for him. And then eventually both of those guys will leave, and I think Travion Henderson will be the sole back there. He definitely can be a workhorse on his own. We saw that in his sophomore season. So, all right, moving on to 30th. The Bills get Walter Nolan, one of the best D tackles in the entire draft class. So that's good. Could see receiver for them as well. This could be somewhere where like Luther Burden would go. But yeah, this is a fine pick. Walter Nolan's a very talented player.
I would prefer Luther Burden go here for them, but from a selfish fantasy perspective, obviously. But good pick and a position of need.
All right, moving on. And speaking of Luther Burden, my Kansas City Chiefs go Luther Burden the third, wide receiver out of Mizzou. It's definitely an interesting pick, right? Because we have Rashee Rice, who's supposed to be our yak guy. And although I do like Rashee Rice a lot, there's very few players that I've seen that have the yak ability that Luther Burden does. Yeah, we kind of need wide receiver. I don't think we go wide receiver in the first round, but it would be awesome to get Luther Burden here. More weapons for Mahomes. How do you feel about Burden to the Chiefs?
Yeah, so obviously the quarterback situation couldn't be much better. Depending on where you would personally rank Mahomes. Obviously, I would hope he's up near the top of everybody's QB rankings. Now, another good thing, you're a Chiefs fan, so I think you can attest to Andy Reid knowing how to maximize his players. And then, I think one thing we would see out of the Chiefs is potentially a lot more a stretching of the field out wide, more receivers, and not necessarily quite as much 12 personnel if this pick was made, because I think if Rashee Rice comes back and is able to be anything close to the player he once was, you still have Worthy out there and Burden. That is going to suck for opposing defenses.
Yeah, and you see Luther Burden in an Andy Reid offense, as long as he doesn't crash out. He does have some off the field type of crash out moments, similar to like George Pickens. But if he can keep it together, man, he could be an explosive playmaker for us. I would love to see it. All right, moving on to the last pick of the first round. You get Nick Emenwari out of South Carolina, one of the best combine performers. Philadelphia Eagles, they just keep doing it over and over again. I don't know how they landed the best defensive back and then the second defensive back in last year's draft class. They were somehow able to do it. They draft extremely well. I hate to say that because of what happened in the Super Bowl, but I can't deny they draft excellent players, and Nick Emenwari, from what we saw at the Combine, is going to be another exceptional player for them. I know C.J. Gardner-Johnson's leaving, so they need a replacement there for sure.
Yeah, insert the Jesse from Breaking Bad meme. They can't keep getting away with this.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so that was the first round. We're going to quickly go through these next two rounds, mainly only talk about the skill position players. So we'll go ahead. Golden to the Giants at 34. Some people are thinking he was a first-round pick. He just falls slightly out of the first round. Somebody to pair with Neighbors. I think that's a fine pick. What do you think?
Yeah, so Neighbors, I would assume, would be more so the X, but have some movement ability like he had last year. I think he'd probably have Golden more so because I think Neighbors is more able to handle press. I would assume you'd have Golden as a Z and slot. And as far as they're concerned, the quarterback play might not be great, but Golden would definitely benefit from having somebody like Neighbors drawing all that defensive attention, but so would Neighbors.
Yeah, absolute speedster as well. We saw the 4.29 combine. I think we agree that he plays a little bit slower on film, but definitely has some speed upside for sure. All right, moving forward. Trey Harris to the Saints at 40. We're definitely not too big on Trey Harris. We thought he was relatively limited as an athlete, kind of like less athletic uh, DK Metcalf. But the Saints do need a vertical X receiver that's not just a speed freak, right? So Trey Harris can maybe fill that role for him.
And they drafted Jackson Dart, ninth overall.
Oh
apparently.
yeah,
So,
and they link back up. So yeah, that definitely would raise Trey Harris's draft stock for me a little bit in terms of rookie draft. Moving forward, Isaiah Bond to the Jets at 42. They don't really have a speed guy, do they? I'm trying to think. I know they have Garrett Wilson.
they drafted Malachi Corley, one of the slowest receivers there was last year.
They have Garrett Wilson. They have Alan Lazard, Malachi Corley. Those guys. They don't necessarily have that speed type of receiver. Bond could be that speed slot or Z for the Jets. I think that's a great landing spot for Bond.
I think it helps Bond tremendously as well as Garrett Wilson because while Bond isn't, necessarily the best prospect, I definitely like him and don't take that as me insulting him. I definitely think that the speed that he brings to the table here, and even though he didn't have the fast 40-yard dash, I personally on film think that he is faster than Golden. I think they're both very fast, and I think that will scare the crap out of defenses and will greatly help Garrett Wilson out.
And you know who has a pretty good deep ball? Justin Fields. So I would love to see some deep balls from Justin Fields to Isaiah Bond. That would be beautiful. All right, moving on here a little bit. Okay. Next guy at 51, we got Caleb Johnson to the Broncos. That's a great landing spot as well, because as of right now, Audric Estime is their presumed starter. Say what you want about him, I guess, but definitely I wouldn't want him to be my workhorse at the time for the time being until he develops, maybe gets better. But Caleb Johnson, at this value, I don't think the Denver Broncos would pass up on him.
Yeah, and if they take Caleb Johnson here with this kind of draft capital, the days of, it's anyone's guess as to who the running back that's going to be getting any touches is going to be would be gone. You don't take a running back this high to not give them usage, unless, of course, you're Charbonnet to the Seahawks. Rest in peace to him.
Or Reggie Bush.
Yeah. Also, rest in peace to him. And there's a commonality here, apparently, so I might be lying. No, but I think he'd be getting quite a few touchdowns, and I think he'd be a very good fit because didn't they take a tight end? I believe they got Tyler Warren in this draft, because if that's true, oh my goodness, that offense.
What a great first 2 rounds for the Broncos in this scenario for sure. All right, then we have to the Packers. We said they didn't need receivers. They didn't listen. Xavier Restrepo out of Miami goes 54th overall to the Packers. A guy that we think has a lot of cool tools in the toolbox. Maybe doesn't have the physical ability to use them at times, but kind of an average athlete with a lot of high-end traits in terms of route running and things like that. We just thought he was relatively limited. What do you think about this? Where does he even fit in this offense?
He'd definitely be a slot. That would conflict with Jaden Reed. I guess Reed would probably be more so the Z. You'd have Romeo Doubs as the X while Christian Watson's out. Dontavian Wicks is the odd man out, unfortunately. And yeah, you'd have yet another wide receiver's fantasy career ruined as he's going to get 3 targets some weeks, 0, 6, 3, 2. So rest in peace to his draft stock if this happens, or anybody in any wide receivers.
Yeah, the wide receiver target share in that offense is very, very thin. Next up, we have Harold Fannin Jr., a very high upside tight end going to the Chargers at 55. If he gets this draft capital, I would even be shocked if he got out of our second round, right? He's got that upside, and I don't think he would necessarily go to the Chargers because John Harbaugh loves his blocking tight ends. Harold Fannin Jr. is not the best blocker, but is dynamic after the catch, dynamic receiver. So how do you feel about this landing spot?
I agree wholeheartedly with what you mentioned about as far as not being a fit from a schematic standpoint of him not being really a very good blocker particularly. There are worse in the class, but now if this were to happen, though, this kind of draft capital in an offense led by Justin Herbert, They did draft. Who was the other receiver they drafted? They drafted Emeka Egbuka to be a clone of Lad McConkey. It would start to get a little bit crowded, but as far as the draft capital is concerned and the quarterback play, that would be absolutely fantastic. And pre-buy, the Chargers were one of the lower pass over expected rate teams, but then post-buy, they were one of the higher teams. So as far as things started to trend towards the end of the year, it actually wasn't as run volumey as it was before the bye week.
And that probably has to do with J.K. Dobbins getting hurt, right? And them not really having a reliable run game. Gus Edwards was horrible. So, yeah, I think Harbaugh kind of learned relatively quickly in the NFL. Like, you can't just be a hard-nosed running team. You have to throw at least 15 to 20 times a game. Perfect example of this is the Detroit Lions, right? They are a run-first team, but definitely need to play off that play action, and they get 15 to 20 passes every game. So, yeah, that is good. Next up, Elikeo Manor, very impressive production profile. A young, early declarer. He declared as a sophomore, so that's very impressive. To the Bills. Bills definitely need wide receiver help. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, so Keon Coleman would be their projected vertical X. And you have Shakir as a Z or slot. I think Shakir would be more so their Z. And then I think you would have a bit of a big slot role here for A.O. Manor.
Yeah, and I could also see Shakir in the slot and A.O. Manor as the Z as well because of some of the flashes that A.O. Manor shows at the catch point. It's definitely not consistent, but it definitely shows some very high profile contested catchability from time to time. It's not consistent, like I said, though. Moving on. Guard, tackle. Next up, Jaden Higgins to the Baltimore Ravens. You did say you needed a vertical X earlier that would scare teams. I don't necessarily know if Jaden Higgins has the speed to threaten vertically, but he is a solid X receiver.
Yeah, so, as far as rookie year is concerned for him, you'd have DeAndre Hopkins, who would be starting as the vertical X for them. Now, he doesn't scare teams as much as he used to anymore, but as far as Jaden Higgins is concerned, he does need to work quite a bit against physical press man coverage. So I would presume they would have Flowers as a Z and probably Higgins as a big slot. They could try putting Higgins as a Z, and they could definitely put Higgins at the X position. But funnily enough, this actually would be one of the better landing spots for rookie production, in my opinion.
Yeah, they have a guy like Zay Flowers that, is kind of like their prototypical slot guy, right? The other guy that y'all have, Rashad Bateman, is another one of those guys that, will probably have a role in offense, at least those two guys, and then D-Hop is also going to have a role. But I think Jaden Higgins in this offense will be able to mix in from time to time and get some targets as well. So that's pretty good. Moving on. A little bit of a faller for Judkins because I've heard, he can be as anywhere from a first-round pick to a mid-second. We get him in the late second. The Chiefs get him at 63rd pick in the draft. We definitely need running back help for sure. Pacheco did not look particularly great when he came back. I know there are reports that he is fully healthy now. But outside of that, we have guys like Carson Steele, who's going to be playing fullback for us. Is decent, but has some ball security issues. We signed Elijah Mitchell. He'll probably be hurt before the beginning of the season. And then we re-signed Kareem Hunt. So I don't know where Judkins lands in that kind of backfield, but I would think he would take command of it and at least start with maybe splitting carries with Kareem Hunt, maybe. Pacheco just looked really poor to me when he came back. Hopefully he can recover because I love Pacheco. But how do you feel about this?
Yeah, we've mentioned that we think he needs to land in a landing spot that has an above-average offensive line. The Chiefs had one previously before injury struck, and now they've had some departures. But as far as the general offense in terms of being having a good quarterback, having good receiving help, that's great. Offensive line is still a little bit iffy in my opinion, so I still think there would be holes for Judkins though because of how much Mahomes scares defenses. So In terms of places that don't have a particularly amazing offensive line projected, at least anymore, I think this is one that could definitely work because of Mahomes.
Yep, for
Over here.
sure. And maybe after his first year, he'd get more touches. I don't think rookie year he'd get that many. Now we're officially into the third round. One of your favorite receivers in this year's class goes to the Cleveland Browns. I know you sighed a little bit whenever we first saw that. How do you feel about this landing spot?
So I will say, at least in this specific mock draft, Cam Ward went here. Now, I don't think he'll be going second in the real life NFL draft.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as that's concerned, at least he would have somebody that I think has very good accuracy where he would be being targeted. As far as target competition, he would have a decent amount of target competition, to be honest with you, being Cedric Tillman as the X. You'd have Jerry Jeudy probably as a Z, I'd imagine, and you'd put Royals in the slot most likely. But Royals and Jerry Jeudy could definitely interchangeably be used there. And then you have David Njoku. There are much better landing spots. This is maybe somewhere in the middle of the road, maybe a little bit towards the undesirable side, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we don't know the long term path for Jerry Jeudy, right? So after maybe I don't remember when his contract's up, but Jalen Royals, as good as he is, especially in the slot role, he could command a good bit of targets. It just depends on who Cam Ward likes, and maybe he likes Royals, right? So, next up, one of my favorite receivers in this draft class, Jack Bech out of TCU to the Raiders. Like we said earlier, the Raiders are probably one of the worst teams when it comes to skill position players. Bech would be wherever he wanted to play, basically, for the Raiders. I think this is one of the best offenses to go to if you're a wide receiver in terms of target volume. So, yeah, Geno Smith would love this guy. You could play him at X, Z, or slot. He's one of the more versatile players, so particularly his X ability. But, yeah, I love this landing spot for him. What do you think?
Yeah, so obviously Brock Bowers will be presumptively the most targeted player, but Jacoby Myers is absolutely an underrated wide receiver, so he deserves some praise as well. He doesn't get the recognition he deserves, but Bech would definitely be getting a solid amount of target opportunity in this offense.
Yeah, for sure. Moving on, we got 3 back-to-back wide receivers. Jalen Noel for the Patriots doesn't really make much sense to me because they have that Pop Douglas guy already for their slot type of role. But Noel, very speedy slot receiver. What do you feel, or how do you feel rather, about this landing spot?
Yeah, I think if they do this, you have to be worried if you're a Pop Douglas owner. Not that you were hopefully depending on him for fantasy, because if you're depending on him, you're probably not a contender. But yeah, a little bit redundant, like you were saying, because they have a fine slot receiver.
Yep.
I would think they would be looking for more of a boundary type of receiver, or at least somebody that's versatile enough to be an X. But if that's what they do, that's what they do.
Yeah. Back-to-back wide receivers. We have Jacksonville taking Tez Johnson. They desperately need a slot type of receiver. Tez Johnson is that guy. He is severely undersized, but one of the shiftiest and more so quick than speedy receiver. I love this landing spot. I think Royals would have been exceptional in this offense, but Tez Johnson goes here instead. How do you feel about this one?
Yeah, so Liam Cohen made mention, obviously, that the offense was going to funnel through Brian Thomas Jr. He didn't mention anything about Gabe Davis, Evan Ingram, and Christian Kirk. Subsequently, Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram were released. That leaves Gabe Davis as the main target competition besides Brian Thomas. So Tez would definitely see the field. Liam Cohen is an incredibly intelligent coordinator for his offense, and he's going to be calling plays. So as far as utilizing Tez to his strengths, I think he will be doing so if this happens. And could you really ask for a much better landing spot in terms of the slot role being wide open with Kirk being gone and then having a creative offensive-minded head coach for long-term stability potentially?
Yeah, I think if you are a slot, if you're able to play the slot at all, and there's a lot of slot specific wide receivers in this offense, in this draft class. Any of them going to the Jaguars is a slam dunk for me because they're going to fit into that role pretty much immediately, barring injury. So that Tess Johnson would fly up my boards if this were to happen. Moving forward, tackle edge. All right. Next guy, we have Jalen Milroe, 80th overall to the Colts. They draft another project quarterback in this scenario after drafting Anthony Richardson just 2 seasons ago. How do you feel about this one? It doesn't make much sense to me.
I completely and wholeheartedly agree with you. But hey, at least this time they don't spend the 4th overall pick on one of these
That's
guys.
fair.
Yeah, it makes no sense to me. You would think they would be looking for as much of a sure thing to at least be a generally accurate quarterback. I feel like that's probably the thing they've missed and been as frustrated with as humanly possible is the general accuracy of their quarterbacks. So makes no sense in my opinion either.
Yeah, he's like Anthony Richardson light for me. A little faster in my opinion than Richardson, which is kind of crazy considering Anthony Richardson ran a 4.46, 4.44, 40 or something like that.
4.43, yeah.
4.43, that's insane. Yeah, Milroe has suffered from the same sort of issues that Richardson has, especially short to intermediate accuracy, but has a pretty solid deep ball. Just like Richardson, except Richardson has a bigger arm, better, more powerful athlete. So I don't know why in the world you would do this. I will say, I know that there's some issues with Richardson's work ethic and, maybe some off the field issues here and there. But with Jalen Milroe, all I've seen in interviews is very good things. So I think, maybe they're like, move on from Richardson due to the work ethic type of deal and just get their project quarterback for Shane Steichen with a guy that's a little more got his head on his shoulders. So next up, a bad landing spot for a tight end in my opinion, just because of the immediate playtime. Elijah Arroyo goes to the Bengals at the 81st pick. How do you feel about that?
Well, first of all, rest in peace to Eric All. Then, yeah, rest in peace to Arroyo for sure his rookie season.
Yeah.
I don't think they'll be getting out of the Gesicki deal in their second season. Maybe they can, but by the third season, they could cut Gesicki, save some money, and then start Arroyo. But yeah, talented player, like you said, poor landing spot.
Poor landing spot for sure. Definitely
target competition.
Kind of target competition as well. I know there's a lot of targets to go around in that offense, but yeah, Gesicki is going to be the guy there. He was great last year, but I mean, if he does get hurt, Arroyo can come in. RIP Eric All, like you said, and that's that. Moving on. The Packers draft Torrey Horton out of Colorado State. Another wide receiver. This guy's more of a vertical X type, so maybe RIP Romeo Dobbs. I don't know. I really think the Packers are in somewhat of a midlife crisis when it comes to wide receivers. They're just taking whatever falls to them. I would be surprised if they take a wide receiver in the first 4 rounds, in my opinion.
At this point, how many wide receivers' fantasy careers can they ruin?
Yeah, I mean, Torrey Horton's a pretty talented guy. Very shifty after the catch. We did see him on a lot of drag routes, but can make a contested catch on the sideline from time to time when asked to do so. So that is good. Moving forward, we have kind of a controversial pick. Jacksonville gets Kyron Lacy. That would be the Gabe Davis replacement. I will say I've heard some people literally, so you're going to get a kick out of this. I heard a guy watching film on Mason Taylor, and he kept getting distracted by a receiver on the boundary, and he thought he was watching 2023 tape, or 2023 tape of Mason Taylor, because he thought Kyron Lacy was Malik Neighbors.
Does Ray Charles do film reviews too?
Yeah. Um. Yeah, so there's some obvious issues with Kyron Lacey, right? He allegedly hit and killed. He was involved allegedly in a hit and run incident that killed a Marine, old retired Marine. So he definitely has some vehicular manslaughter charges that he's up against at the moment. But I will say from the things that I watch, he is a talented player. He definitely has some good ball skills. Definitely kind of limited with the route running. I will say he's kind of clean in all aspects. He's a pretty well-rounded player. Uh, but that's crazy draft capital for a guy that could be sentenced to multiple years in prison as early as the start of the season.
That's yeah. This is just not happening. And in all seriousness, our condolences to the Marine's family. Death is unexpected and it sucks. As far as this is concerned, this is just not happening.
Yeah, for sure. All right, moving on. We got Ty Felton. This is a guy that you really had liked the landing spot for him. The Rams definitely need another receiver, a third guy, right? I know they had, what's his name?
Tutu Atwell is their field stretcher at times.
Tutu Atwell, and then, man, he's on the tip of my tongue. The other guy.
Whittington.
Jordan Whittington.
Okay.
Jordan Whittington. He played well when he got opportunity. But Ty Felton, I mean, he's a very talented vertical X in my opinion.
Yeah, so I think you'd have Devontae Adams playing the X for them. I think you'd have Puka in the Z. I think you'd put Felton in the slot. This guy is lethal after the catch. Target volume, he is going to be the third option. You could probably expect, 4 to 6 targets a game. But he has the yak ability to make the most of those. And long term, I do think there's a lot of upside. And being connected to Sean McVay is never a bad thing.
Yep, for sure. Then we have Seattle taking Will Howard out of Ohio State. I would really have liked this landing spot to go for Milroe. Maybe swap Milroe and Howard here. I think Howard will go above Milroe just because he's more of a sure thing. Even though he didn't have great throwing drills at the combine, Will Howard's just really safe pick. I think he's very accurate in the short to intermediate areas of the field. And you don't have to play him right away either. You have Darnold there as the bridge starter. So that's great for Will Howard to sit and learn behind Sam Darnold, I guess. So, yeah, I like this landing spot.
Yeah, when Sam Darnold doesn't work out, that would be good for him because he'll have been able to watch what not to do for a couple of years.
Yeah, if even sooner. I know his deal is basically a 1-year deal, so they could cut him as early as this next offseason. So, all right, Mason Taylor to the Saints. How do you feel about this one? I'm not even going to speak on this.
At least it wasn't a first-round pick like that ridiculous mock draft we saw earlier.
We saw a mock draft where he went 31st to my Kansas City Chiefs. And if you guys are regulars of the channel, you know that Mason Taylor is our worst graded tight end. He might be the worst graded tight end I've ever seen, especially that's getting his draft capital. One of the worst blockers that I've ever seen. He is a physical guy, but he is a detriment to his team in the run game. I saw him basically make plays for the defense on his own. So, yeah, Saints, I don't know if they get a tight end here because they just re-signed Juwan Johnson to a relatively big-time deal, which kind of surprised me considering his kind of lack of production. But, yeah, they definitely need maybe another tight end, and maybe in the third round this makes sense, but not Mason Taylor in my opinion.
It wouldn't be very helpful for them because the defense would have a 12th man in the run game at all times.
Yep, for sure. Moving on. Ooh. RJ Harvey, one of your favorite running backs in the class. Definitely high up the list for me as well. Out of UCF to the 49ers at the 100th pick. With how they run block in San Francisco.
They do a mid zone.
Yeah, they'd like to run the stretch as well, the stretch concept. That would be particularly good for RJ Harvey just because of his cutback ability and his ability, his just shiftiness, I would love this for RJ Harvey.
Yeah, I mean, you don't even. I mean, Patrick Taylor can be started when he's getting the majority of the touches in any individual game. So this guy's actually talented by NFL standards. We comped him to LaShawn McCoy. Now, do we think he's necessarily going to have the exact same career as LaShawn McCoy? No, it's a stylistic comp. But essentially, imagine somebody with that kind of style of running ability in a Shanahan offense. Yes, please.
Yeah, sign me up 100%. And their running back room is definitely not long term. I mean, Garindo's fine. Like you said, Patrick Taylor, people probably won't even know who that is for the most part. But yes, he is startable when there's nobody else starting. Moving on, we have Ollie Gordon to the Rams. Beautiful landing spot for me. He will definitely be taking over for Kyren Williams. And, I mean, Blake Corum's there, and I like Blake Corum, but will he be able to stay healthy? So far, we've seen that he's gotten hurt a couple of times. Ollie Gordon can stand up to the amount of carries. We've seen that basically his whole career. So, yeah, I like this landing spot. I don't know if he necessarily plays here soon, but it is a nice landing spot for, maybe a second or third year.
Yeah, so getting to what you just said there, everybody was worried that when Sean McVay drafted Blake Corum this last season that they were going to intermingle between him and Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams kept the job for the entirety of the season, hardly ceded any work, maybe about 20% at most of the running back work to Corum. Then in the final game, when they sat the starters, Corum broke his forearm, I believe.
Yep.
So the thing is, he would have to, in my opinion, outright win the running back job down the line after they eventually get rid of Kyren Williams directly against Blake Corum, because everything we've seen from McVay is that he uses one starting running back. So he would either need to win the job outright or he's probably not seeing any work.
Yep, for sure. And then that's the end. Lions take a Jack Sawyer, who's a very talented edge rusher, by the way, very complete player. But outside of that, that's basically 3 rounds of mock draft. There's any players that you've noticed that kind of got snubbed from this 3-round mock draft, please let us know. There's definitely some players that I could think of that got snubbed here, right? So,
Facial Tutin's one that could potentially go in that, maybe in that 3rd round range.
Yeah, and then Gunnar Helms, another guy that could have easily went here instead of Mason Taylor. So, yeah, definitely some guys that could have gotten on this list for sure.
All right, everybody. We hope you've enjoyed this mock draft review. Where do you think some of the biggest mistakes were made by these, mock picks? What do you think is the best fit? Let us know below in the comment section. We'll be curious to see what you think. You definitely could tell based on our reactions whether we were, particularly hopeful or worried about some of these decisions made by teams. Specifically the Egbuka pick comes to mind. But yeah, let us know below in the comment section. You have anything else to add, Bobby?
No. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.